Have you ever felt like you were living in someone else's shadow your entire life? That no matter what you did, it was never quite enough? Well, that was my reality for 22 years. I'm Sarah, and I thought I knew my family. I thought I understood the rules of our household, the expectations, the sacrifices we all had to make. But sometimes, the people closest to you are the ones hiding the biggest secrets. And when those secrets come to light, they don't just change everything you thought you knew. They shatter it completely. This is the story of how I discovered that everything I believed about fairness, family, and love was built on a foundation of lies that went deeper than I could have ever imagined. But before we begin, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us where you're listening from. The rain drummed against my dorm room window like an endless percussion, matching the anxiety pounding in my chest as I stared at my phone screen. The text from my father was short, cold, and devastating. We need to talk. Come home this weekend. It's important. I'd been dreading this conversation for weeks. My junior year at Northwestern was supposed to be my breakthrough year, the year I'd finally prove to my parents that their investment in my education was worth it. Instead, I was struggling to keep my head above water, both academically and financially. The pattern had been building for months. Every phone call home became an interrogation about my grades, my social life, my focus. Every dinner conversation during breaks turned into a lecture about responsibility and the real world. I'd started to feel like I was constantly auditioning for the role of worthy daughter, and apparently I was failing the part. The drive from Evanston to our suburban Chicago home felt longer than usual that Friday evening. The familiar tree-lined streets of Winnetka looked different somehow, as if I was seeing them through a lens of impending doom. Our colonial-style house stood majestically behind its perfectly manicured lawn, every window glowing warmly against the October darkness. The circular driveway was freshly paved, another expense that somehow never seemed to strain my parents' budget when it came to maintaining their image. As I pulled up behind my father's BMW and my mother's Mercedes, I couldn't help but think about my own car, a 10-year-old Honda Civic that I'd bought with money from my summer job at a coffee shop. When I'd asked my parents to help with the down payment, they'd told me it would be character building, to save up myself. Looking at their luxury vehicles now, that conversation felt different. "Sarah! Honey, we're in the living room," my mother's voice called out as I stepped through the front door. Her tone was carefully neutral, the way she spoke when she was trying to manage a difficult situation, the same voice she used when dealing with unruly students at the private school where she taught. I found them sitting on opposite ends of our cream-colored Italian leather sofa, looking like they were about to conduct a board meeting rather than talk to their daughter. Dad had his reading glasses on, a manila folder open on the coffee table in front of him. Mom sat with her hands folded, her expression unreadable behind her perfectly applied makeup. Even at home on a Friday evening, she looked like she'd stepped out of a catalog. The living room itself felt imposing in that moment, the crystal chandelier casting prismatic light across oil paintings that cost more than most people's cars, the Persian rug that Mom had spent months selecting, the antique mahogany furniture that had belonged to my grandmother. This was a room designed to impress, and right now it felt like a courtroom. "Sit down, sweetheart," Dad said, gesturing to the armchair across from them. His voice had that edge to it that I recognized from his business calls, polite but firm, leaving no room for negotiation. "We need to discuss your future." My stomach dropped. I'd been hoping this was about something else, anything else. Maybe they wanted to plan Christmas early, or discuss summer internships, or even lecture me about my choice of friends. But the folder on the table and their formal positioning told a different story. "Is this about my grades? Because I told you, I'm bringing them up this semester. I just had a rough patch with organic chemistry, but I'm getting tutoring now." "It's not just about your grades, Sarah." Mom's voice was gentle but firm, with that disappointed undertone that always made me feel like I was 8 years old again. "It's about everything. Your direction, your choices, your commitment to your education and your future." Dad cleared his throat and picked up a paper from the folder. I could see it was a printout of my transcript, marked up with red pen. "Your GPA dropped to 2.7 last semester. You changed your major for the 3rd time, from pre-med to business to psychology. You've been going out more, joining sororities, focusing less on your studies, and frankly, we're not seeing the return on our investment that we expected." The phrase, return on investment, hit me like a slap. Return on investment? Dad, I'm your daughter, not a stock portfolio. Of course you are, he said, but his tone remained businesslike. And as your parents, it's our responsibility to make sure you're prepared for the real world. We've been paying your full tuition, room and board, your meal plan, books, spending money, everything. That's over $65,000 a year, Sarah. We can't continue to support someone who isn't taking their future seriously. I felt the walls closing in around me. The numbers he was throwing around felt astronomical, and the way he said them made me feel like a failed investment rather than a struggling student. What are you saying exactly? Mom leaned forward, her blue eyes filled with what looked like genuine concern, but also something harder, disappointment, maybe even frustration. We're saying that we need to see real change, real commitment. If you can't prove to us that you're serious about your education by the end of the semester, we'll be cutting off your financial support. The room spun slightly. You're threatening to cut me off? Completely. We're giving you an ultimatum, Dad corrected, pulling out another sheet of paper that looked like a contract. Bring your GPA up to at least 3.5 by the end of a semester, stick with your current psychology major, no more changes, and show us that you're mature enough to handle the responsibility we've given you. No more sorority events, no more casual dating, no more of this party lifestyle you've adopted. And if I can't, I asked, though I already knew the answer, then you'll need to figure out how to pay for school yourself, he said simply, sliding the paper across the coffee table toward me. Maybe take some time off, get a job, learn what it means to work for what you want. Community college is always an option if you want to prove yourself first. I picked up the paper with shaking hands. It was actually typed up like a contract, with specific terms and conditions. Maintain a 3.5 GPA. Complete at least 15 credit hours per semester. No academic probation. No more than 2 absences per class. Submit weekly progress reports. The list went on. You want me to sign this? I asked, incredulous. We want you to understand that we're serious, Mom said. This isn't a game, Sarah. Your education is costing us more than many people make in a year. We need to see that you value it. I sat there in stunned silence, watching my parents, these people who had raised me, who were supposed to love me unconditionally, basically tell me that their love came with a price tag and a performance review. This isn't fair, I whispered. I'm trying. College is hard, and I'm still figuring things out. Isn't that what your 20s are for? Isn't that what college is supposed to be about? Finding yourself. Some people have that luxury, Mom said, and for the first time, I heard something almost cold in her voice. But you're 22 years old, Sarah. It's time to grow up. Some of your high school friends are already graduating, some are getting married, some have clear career paths. You're floundering. Emma's only 18, and she seems to be doing just fine without all these restrictions, I said, bringing up my younger sister almost reflexively. The look that passed between my parents was so quick I almost missed it, but it was there, a flash of something that might have been guilt, or secrets, or both. Emma's situation is different, Dad said finally. She's always been more focused, more mature for her age. She knows what she wants. She's studying art therapy, I pointed out. That's not exactly a practical career choice. Art therapy is a legitimate field, Mom said defensively. And Emma has always been exceptionally talented. She has a clear vision for her future. The conversation continued for another hour, with them laying out their expectations in excruciating detail. I needed to maintain a 3.5 GPA, commit to my current psychology major, stop going to parties, limit my social activities, attend mandatory study sessions, and essentially transform into the perfect student they wanted me to be. All by December. They also informed me that they'd be monitoring my spending through my credit card statements and bank account, both of which they had access to since they'd co-signed everything when I turned 18. We're not trying to control you, Dad said as he walked me to the door later that evening. We're trying to teach you accountability. One day, you'll thank us for this. As I drove back to campus that Sunday, my hands gripping the steering wheel, so tightly my knuckles were white, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was fundamentally wrong with this picture. My parents had always been strict, always had high expectations, but this felt different. This felt like they were treating me like a stranger whose worthiness they needed to evaluate. But what choice did I have? I couldn't afford Northwestern on my own. I couldn't afford any college on my own. I'd looked into financial aid before, but with my parents' income, I didn't qualify for need-based assistance. I was trapped. So I threw myself into my studies with a desperation I'd never felt before, determined to meet their impossible standards and prove that I was worthy of their continued support. I dropped out of my sorority, stopped going to social events, ended a budding relationship with a guy from my statistics class, and turned my dorm room into a fortress of textbooks and study guides. I had no idea that while I was fighting for scraps of their approval, my younger sister Emma was living in a completely different reality, one where rules didn't apply and money flowed like water. November came and went in a blur of all-nighters, study groups, and anxiety-induced insomnia. I was actually managing to pull my grades up. My psychology professor even commented on my improved performance during office hours. My social psychology midterm came back with an A-, and for the first time in months, I felt like maybe I could meet my parents' ultimatum. I'd become a ghost of my former self. While my roommate Jessica went out with friends and lived the normal college experience, I spent every evening in the library until closing time. I'd given up coffee dates, movie nights, even study groups that might be too social. I was so focused on proving my worth that I'd forgotten what it felt like to enjoy learning. That's when Emma called me on a Tuesday night, giggling like she'd had too much wine. "Sarah! Oh my God, you'll never guess what happened today," she practically sang into the phone. Emma was my younger sister by 4 years, currently a freshman at DePaul University studying art therapy. She'd always been the creative one, the free spirit, the one who somehow managed to skate through life without facing the same pressure I did. While I'd spent my teenage years being lectured about grades and college applications, Emma had spent hers painting and taking photography classes that our parents called enriching experiences. "What's up, Em?" I asked, grateful for the distraction from my molecular psychology textbook. It was 11 p.m., and I was reviewing material for the third time that day. "I just got back from looking at apartments with Mom and Dad," she said, her voice bubbling with excitement. "They're helping me get a place off campus. Can you believe it? A whole apartment to myself, right in Lincoln Park." I felt my stomach lurch. "What do you mean they're helping you get an apartment? You're a freshman. Don't you have to live in dorms?" "Well, technically yes, but Mom talked to the housing department and got me an exemption. She said I needed a more mature living environment to focus on my art. And Dad said the dorms were too distracting for someone with my creative temperament." My creative temperament? Emma had been hearing phrases like that her whole life, while I'd been hearing about responsibility and practicality. "But off-campus housing is expensive." "How are?" "Oh, they're paying for it, obviously. The rent is like $2,800 a month, but Dad said not to worry about it. He wants me to focus on my art and not have to deal with dorm drama and cafeteria food." Isn't that amazing? The textbook slipped from my numb fingers. $2,800 a month? Emma, that's more than most people make in a month. That's more than I made working full-time this summer. I know, right? And it's gorgeous, Sarah. It has these huge windows and exposed brick walls, and there's this amazing art studio space with north-facing light. Mom said I need a proper environment to nurture my creativity. Plus, there's a doorman and everything. I was quiet for so long that Emma asked if I was still there. "Yeah, I managed. I'm here. That's really great, Oh, and the best part, they're also giving me a monthly allowance for art supplies and groceries. Like, a real allowance, not just emergency money. Mom said she doesn't want me to have to work while I'm focusing on my studies." The irony was crushing. While I was being threatened with financial abandonment if I didn't maintain a 3.5 GPA, Emma was being handed a luxury apartment and spending money for simply existing. "You should come see it once I move in next month," Emma continued, oblivious to my shock. "We could have sister sleepovers like when we were kids. And there's this incredible rooftop deck where I can paint. Dad said he might even help me set up a kiln up there for pottery." After we hung up, I sat in my cramped dorm room, which I shared with a roommate who snored and left dirty dishes everywhere, trying to process what I'd just heard. My parents, who were threatening to cut me off if I didn't maintain a 3.5 GPA, were casually dropping nearly $34,000 a year on an apartment for Emma. An apartment she didn't need for a sister who had never faced a single ultimatum or threat of financial abandonment. I called my mom the next morning, catching her during her free period at school. "Hi, honey," she answered cheerfully. "How are your studies going? Did you get that psychology paper back yet?" "Fine," I said, skipping the pleasantries. "Emma told me about the apartment." There was a pause, and I could hear the bustle of high school students in the background. "Oh, that?" "Yes, we thought it would be good for her to have her own space. You know how sensitive she is." "Sensitive?" I couldn't keep the incredulity out of my voice. "Mom, you're spending more on her apartment than most families make in a year. Meanwhile, you're threatening to cut me off completely if I don't jump through a dozen hoops." "Sarah, that's different," Mom said, her tone becoming defensive. I could hear her moving, probably stepping into an empty classroom for privacy. "Emma's situation is unique. She needs. What does she need that I don't?" I interrupted. "What makes her so special that she gets a luxury apartment and a monthly allowance while I'm fighting to keep any support at all?" "You're being dramatic, honey. Emma's always been more delicate, more artistic. She needs the right environment to thrive. You're stronger, more independent. You can handle more pressure." The line went quiet as I absorbed this. "So I'm being punished for being strong." "You're not being punished. You're being held accountable. There's a difference." But there wasn't a difference, not really. And as the weeks passed, I started noticing other things that I'd been too stressed and focused to see before. Emma's Instagram posts, which I'd never paid much attention to, suddenly seemed to tell a different story. There were photos of expensive art supplies, professional-grade paints that cost hundreds of dollars, easels that were worth more than my textbooks. There were pictures of her at upscale restaurants in downtown Chicago, sometimes with our parents, sometimes with friends. Designer clothes that I knew cost more than my monthly food budget. Tickets to art gallery openings and theater shows. When I mentioned being stressed about money for textbooks during one of our weekly check-in calls, my parents told me to look into used books or digital rentals. When Emma posted about wanting new professional brushes for an advanced painting class, they appeared in her dorm room the next week along with a complete set of oil paints. I started keeping a mental tally. The apartment, $2,800 per month. Monthly allowance, probably $1,000 based on her spending patterns. Art supplies, easily $500 per month. Dining out and entertainment, another $800 per month. Emma was living on what amounted to a $65,000 annual budget, while I was being scrutinized for every purchase over $20. The inequality was staggering, but what hurt more was the realization that this wasn't new. This pattern had been there all along, hidden beneath the surface of our family dynamics. I'd just been too focused on trying to earn their approval to see it clearly. I started thinking back to our childhood, looking for signs I'd missed. Emma's bedroom had always been redecorated more frequently than mine. She'd gotten art lessons, dance classes, music lessons, whatever she showed interest in. When I'd asked for guitar lessons at age 12, my parents had said we'd see how I did with my grades first. When Emma had asked for photography classes at age 10, she'd been enrolled within a week. Emma had attended summer art camps that cost thousands of dollars. I'd been sent to academic enrichment programs that were chosen more for their affordability than their quality. Emma had gotten her own car for her 16th birthday, a brand new Toyota Prius that my parents said was perfect for her artistic personality. I'd gotten my used Honda when I was 18, and only after working summers to pay for part of it. The more I thought about it, the more obvious it became. Emma was the favored child, the golden daughter who could do no wrong. And I was the workhorse, the one who was expected to earn every scrap of attention and support. December finals arrived with brutal Chicago weather and even more brutal pressure. I was maintaining a 3.6 GPA, above their requirement, but I felt hollow, like I was performing in a play where everyone else knew the script except me. The day after my last final, I decided to surprise my parents with the good news in person. I'd exceeded their expectations, met every requirement in their contract. Surely this would be the moment when they acknowledged my efforts, when they told me they were proud of me, when things went back to normal. I drove home unannounced, planning to walk in with my grade report and finally get the recognition I'd been fighting for. Instead, I walked into a conversation that would reveal just how deep the deception ran, and how little I actually knew about my own family. I used my key to let myself into the house, calling out as I kicked off my snow-covered boots in the entryway. "Mom! Dad! I'm home. The house smelled like my mother's expensive vanilla candles and fresh coffee, the familiar sense of home that usually comforted me. But today, something felt different. There was a tension in the air that I couldn't quite identify. No answer came to my greeting, but I could hear voices coming from Dad's home office down the hallway. The door was slightly ajar, and I could make out the familiar sound of my parents in serious conversation. I was about to announce myself when I heard Emma's name, followed by numbers that made me freeze in place. So the trust fund will give her access to $400,000 when she turns 25, Dad was saying, his voice carrying the tone he used when discussing his business investments. Plus the quarterly distributions until then. She'll never have to worry about money, not like we did when we were starting out. I pressed myself against the hallway wall, my heart hammering so loudly I was sure they could hear it. I just hope we're doing the right thing, Mom replied, and I could hear papers rustling. Sometimes I feel guilty about Sarah. Sarah's fine, Dad interrupted, his voice firm and dismissive. She's always been the responsible one, the independent one. She'll figure it out. Emma needs more support. She's always been fragile, and after what happened when she was younger. I know. The anxiety, the depression, the eating disorder, the hospitalization. We almost lost her, Richard. I just want to make sure she's taken care of, that she never has to face that kind of pressure again. My legs felt weak. I gripped the hallway wall, straining to hear more while processing what I'd already learned. A trust fund. Emma had a $400,000 trust fund that I knew nothing about. The apartment, the monthly allowance, the art supplies, the trust fund, it's all necessary, Dad continued. Emma needs security to heal and grow. She needs to know that she can pursue her passions without worrying about practical concerns. Sarah's strong enough to make her own way. But what if Sarah finds out about the trust fund? Mom asked, her voice worried. She's going to wonder why Emma gets everything handed to her while we're making Sarah jump through hoops like a trained seal. Sarah doesn't need to know about the trust fund, Dad said firmly. What she doesn't know won't hurt her. Besides, we're teaching her valuable life lessons about earning what she gets. Character building. It'll make her stronger in the long run. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Not only did Emma have a trust fund worth nearly $500,000, but my parents were actively conspiring to keep it from me. While I was killing myself to maintain a 3.6 GPA to keep their financial support, Emma had been sitting on a fortune this entire time. The quarterly distributions are substantial too, Dad continued. $15,000 every 3 months until she's 25. That's enough to cover her apartment, her allowance, her art supplies, everything. And we're calling it parental support, so she doesn't even realize it's her own money. Sometimes I think we're being too hard on Sarah, Mom said softly. She's been working so hard this semester, really turning things around. Maybe we should ease up on the restrictions. Sarah chose her path when she started slacking off in school, Dad replied coldly. Natural consequences. If she wants our support, she needs to earn it. Emma never gave us problems like that. Emma never gave them problems, because Emma never had to. Emma had a safety net that I didn't even know existed. And you're sure the lawyers set everything up correctly? Mom asked. The trust is completely separate from our other assets. Completely. It was funded when Emma was born, just like we planned to do for Sarah. But after Emma's issues, we decided she needed the extra security. Sarah's proven she's resilient. She doesn't need the same level of protection. Wait. They had planned to set up a trust for me too, but they decided against it. My knees buckled slightly as the full scope of their deception hit me. What about college? Mom asked. Are we still planning to pay for Emma's full education? Of course. That's separate from the trust. Emma will graduate debt-free and with a substantial nest egg. By the time she's 30, between the trust fund and careful investments, she'll be financially independent for life. And Sarah will have learned the value of hard work and earned her success. It'll be better for her character in the long run. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. I made it to the front door and quietly let myself out, sitting in my car in the driveway as snow began to fall again. Everything made sense now. Emma's casual attitude about money, her lack of stress about the future, her ability to focus on her art without worrying about practical concerns. She knew. She had to know about the trust fund. And my parents, The people who claimed to love me equally had been lying to my face for months, maybe years. I thought about every time they'd lectured me about responsibility, every time they'd made me feel like I wasn't good enough, every time they'd held their financial support over my head like a sword. All while Emma lived in luxury, supported by money that was already hers. The really crushing part was learning that they'd originally planned to set up a trust for me too. That meant this wasn't about not having enough money, it was a deliberate choice to treat us differently. They decided that Emma deserved financial security, and I deserved to struggle. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Saw your car in the driveway. Did you come by? We're here if you want to talk about your grades. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. Just dropped something off. Heading back to campus. But I didn't go back to campus. Instead, I drove aimlessly through the suburbs, past houses that looked just like ours, full of families that probably had their own secrets and inequalities. I found myself in a Starbucks parking lot, crying in my car like a teenager, trying to process the magnitude of what I'd learned. I'd spent months killing myself to meet their impossible standards, thinking that if I just worked hard enough, if I just proved myself worthy enough, they'd love and support me the way they supported Emma. But it was never about worthiness. It was about favoritism, pure and simple. Emma was the chosen child, the one they decided deserved a life of ease and privilege. I was the other child, the one who was supposed to be grateful for scraps. After sitting in that parking lot for 2 hours, I finally knew what I had to do. I drove to Emma's new apartment in Lincoln Park, my mind racing with questions and anger and hurt that felt too big for my body to contain. It was time to confront my sister about the lies our family had been built on. And I needed to know exactly how much she knew about the trust fund that was shaping both our lives. Emma answered the door of her luxury apartment in paint-splattered clothes, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Sarah, what a surprise. Come in, come in. I was just working on a piece for my portfolio." The apartment was everything she described and more. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lincoln Park, where snow was beginning to fall on the bare trees. The exposed brick walls were lined with expensive art supplies, easels, canvases, paints, brushes that I now knew cost more than my textbooks. The furniture looked like it came from a West Elm catalog, all modern lines and carefully chosen accent pieces. There was even a baby grand piano in the corner, something Emma had mentioned wanting to learn. This wasn't just an apartment, it was an artist's dream studio, and it probably cost more per month than I'd make in my first job out of college. "Isn't it amazing?" Emma asked, spinning around with her arms outstretched. "I still can't believe Mom and Dad did this for me. I mean, I know I'm lucky, but sometimes I feel like I'm living in a fairy tale." "Emma," I said, my voice strangely calm despite the storm raging inside me. "Do you know about the trust fund?" The spinning stopped. Emma's face went white, and I had my answer before she even spoke. "What trust fund?" she asked, but her eyes wouldn't meet mine, and she'd unconsciously taken a step backward. "The $400,000 trust fund that Dad set up for you. The one with quarterly distributions of $15,000. The one that ensures you'll never have to worry about money while I'm fighting to keep scraps of financial support." Emma sank onto her expensive Italian leather couch, her head in her hands. "Sarah, how did you find out? So you did know." The calm in my voice surprised even me. It was the calm that comes before a tornado touches down. "How long have you known?" "Since I was 18, she whispered. "But Sarah, you have to understand." "Understand what?" The calm was cracking now, anger seeping through like water through a dam. "Understand that while I've been killing myself to meet impossible standards, you've been sitting on a fortune? Understand that our parents have been lying to me for years while treating you like a princess." "It's not like that," Emma said, tears starting to fall. "You don't understand what I went through, what I'm still going through." "Then explain it to me," I said, sitting down across from her on a chair that probably cost more than my monthly food budget. "Because right now, all I see is favoritism dressed up as concern." Emma was quiet for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. When she finally looked up at me, I saw something I'd never seen before, genuine fear. "You really don't remember, do you?" she asked softly. "What happened when I was 14? I searched my memory, trying to push past my anger to recall that time. When Emma was 14, I was 18 and preparing for college. You had some issues. Anxiety, depression. You were in therapy for a while. I tried to kill myself, Sarah. The words hung in the air between us like a physical weight. I took a bottle of Mom's sleeping pills and nearly died. I was hospitalized for 3 weeks, then in residential treatment for 6 months. The memory came flooding back. Emma's sudden absence from home, the hushed conversations, the way our parents' attention seemed to completely shift to her. I'd been so focused on my own college preparations, so excited about my future, that I'd accepted their explanation of Emma needs some extra help right now without digging deeper. I remember some of that, I said quietly, my anger momentarily replaced by shock. But I thought it was just teenage stuff. Depression that could be fixed with therapy. It wasn't teenage stuff. Emma's voice was stronger now, more direct than I'd ever heard it. I had severe clinical depression, an eating disorder that had me down to 95 pounds, and anxiety so bad I couldn't leave the house some days. The doctors said I was at extremely high risk for another attempt. She stood up and walked to her easel, where a half-finished painting showed a dark, stormy landscape with a single bright spot of light breaking through the clouds. The trust fund wasn't favoritism, Sarah. It was insurance. Mom and Dad were terrified that if I had to face the same pressures you did, working for everything, proving my worth, competing in the real world, I'd break again. Permanently this time. So they decided to protect you from reality. They decided to give me a different path, Emma said, turning back to me. A path where I could focus on healing and finding myself without the stress that nearly killed me. I sat in silence, processing this information. Part of me felt relieved. There was a reason for the disparity, and it wasn't simple favoritism. But another part of me felt even more frustrated. But that doesn't make it fair to me, I said finally. I've been made to feel like I'm not good enough, like I have to earn every scrap of love and support, while you get everything handed to you. How is that okay? Emma's expression crumbled. It's not okay. I felt guilty about it every single day for 4 years. Do you think I don't know how unfair this is? Do you think I don't see how hard you work while I get everything for free? Then why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you stand up for me? Because I was terrified that if I rocked the boat, if I caused any conflict or stress, I'd spiral again. The doctors, the therapists, everyone always talked about avoiding triggers, maintaining stability. So I stayed quiet and hated myself for it. Emma walked over to a drawer and pulled out a folder. I've been in therapy this whole time, you know. Working on getting stronger, more independent. Look at this. She handed me a stack of papers. They were journal entries, therapy homework, and what looked like a treatment plan. The most recent entry was dated just a week ago. Dr. Martinez says I need to talk to Sarah about the guilt I feel over the financial inequality. She's right that keeping the secret is just another form of the avoidance behaviors that got me sick in the first place. I know it's not fair to Sarah, but I'm scared that if I upset the family dynamic, everything will fall apart again. But maybe it's already falling apart. Maybe honesty is the only way to fix it. I've been working up the courage to have this conversation with you, Emma said. My therapist has been pushing me to advocate for more equality between us, to tell Mom and Dad that their overprotection is keeping me from growing. And I've been too scared. But seeing what they're putting you through, making you jump through hoops while I live in luxury, it's not right. It's not helping either of us. She sat back down across from me, leaning forward with an intensity I'd never seen from her before. I want to give you half of the trust fund, Sarah, and I want us to confront Mom and Dad together about how they've been handling this. The offer stunned me. Emma, I don't want your money. I want our parents to treat us equally. The money is a start, she said. But you're right about the bigger issue. They're so focused on protecting me that they're hurting you, and honestly, they're hurting me too. I need to learn to stand on my own, and you deserve to be supported while you figure out your path. Over the next hour, Emma told me everything. The trust fund had been set up when she was born, just like one had been planned for me. But after her suicide attempt and subsequent diagnosis of severe clinical depression and anxiety disorders, our parents had made the decision to restructure their financial planning. They kept Emma's trust fund and added to it, reasoning that she would need extra support throughout her life. They dissolved the plans for my trust fund, deciding that I was resilient enough to make my own way. The really twisted part, Emma said, is that they convinced themselves they were doing what was best for both of us. They told themselves that making you struggle would make you stronger, while protecting me would help me heal. But what they really did was create two completely different realities for their daughters. She pulled out her phone and showed me her banking app. Look at this. I get $15,000 deposited into my account every 3 months, and I've been told it's family support. I didn't even know it was my own trust fund money until I turned 18 and had to sign papers. The numbers on the screen were staggering. Emma's checking account had a balance of $23,000. Her savings account showed $87,000. I was looking at more money than I'd probably seen in years. Emma, this is insane. You have nearly $110,000 just sitting in your accounts. I know, she said miserably. And every time I spend money on art supplies or go out to dinner, I think about you eating ramen noodles and stressing about textbook costs. It makes me sick. I leaned back in the expensive chair, trying to process everything. So our parents have been playing psychological games with both of us. They've been overprotecting you to the point where you feel guilty for existing, and they've been punishing me for being strong enough to handle it. Exactly. And the worst part is, I think they genuinely believe they're doing the right thing. In their minds, they're protecting their fragile daughter and building character in their strong daughter. Emma stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the snow falling on Lincoln Park. I've been thinking about this for months, Sarah. What if we confronted them together? What if we demanded that they treat us equally, not just financially, but emotionally? What do you mean? I mean, what if I told them I don't want the overprotection anymore? That I want to learn to be independent, to face some of the same challenges you face? And what if you demanded the same level of support and respect they give me? The idea was terrifying and appealing at the same time. What if they say no? What if they just cut us both off? Then we'll figure it out together, Emma said, turning back to me. I have enough money in my accounts to support both of us for a while. And maybe it's time for me to learn what it feels like to work for something. That weekend, we sat our parents down in the same living room where they'd given me their ultimatum 2 months earlier. This time, Emma and I sat together on the couch while they took the armchairs, and the power dynamic felt completely different. We need to talk, I began, about the trust fund, about the apartment, about the completely different standards you've held us to, and about the lies you've been telling. The color drained from both of their faces. How did you? Mom started. I overheard you discussing Emma's trust fund, I said. All of it. The $400,000, the quarterly distributions, the fact that you originally planned to set one up for me too but decided against it. Dad's jaw tightened. You were eavesdropping. I was coming home to share my good grades with you. I shot back. The grades I earned while killing myself to meet your impossible standards, not knowing that my sister had a $500,000 safety net the entire time. Emma spoke up, her voice shaking but determined. Mom, Dad, I know why you set up the trust fund. I know you were scared after my suicide attempt, and I understand that you wanted to protect me. But what you've done to Sarah isn't fair, and it's not helping me either. The conversation that followed was painful and messy. There were tears, accusations, and long periods of uncomfortable silence. Mom cried when Emma described her guilt about the inequality. Dad got defensive when I pointed out the emotional damage their approach had caused. We almost lost you, Mom said to Emma, tears streaming down her face. You were in that hospital bed, so thin and fragile, and the doctor said that stress was a major trigger for your condition. We couldn't risk putting you through what other kids go through. But what about what you put me through? I asked. Do you have any idea what it's like to feel like you have to earn your parents' love? To constantly feel like you're not good enough, while watching your sister get everything handed to her? We thought you were strong enough to handle it, Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. Strong enough to handle being treated like a second-class citizen in my own family? I shot back. Strong enough to handle conditional love while Emma gets unconditional support. Emma leaned forward. Dad, the overprotection isn't helping me. It's keeping me from growing, from learning to be independent. My therapist says that I'll never fully recover if I don't learn to face challenges and overcome them myself. Your therapist doesn't understand, Mom began. My therapist understands better than you do, Emma interrupted, with more force than I'd ever heard from her. Dr. Martinez has been working with me for 4 years. She knows my case inside and out. And she says that what you're doing is enabling my anxiety, not helping it. The argument continued for hours. Dad insisted that they'd done what they thought was best. Mom worried that changing anything would trigger Emma's depression again. Emma fought back tears as she explained how the guilt was eating her alive. I demanded to know why my strength was being punished instead of celebrated. But slowly, things began to shift. Emma advocated for herself in ways I'd never seen before, telling our parents that their overprotection was keeping her from growing. I explained how their conditional support had made me feel unloved and unworthy, how I'd started to measure my worth based on their approval. "I want to give Sarah half of my trust fund," Emma announced suddenly, about 3 hours into the conversation. "Absolutely not," Dad said immediately. "It's my money," Emma said firmly. "You set it up for me, which means it's mine to do with as I choose. And I choose to share it with my sister, who should have had the same opportunities one did." "Emma, you don't understand the long-term implications," Mom started. "I understand perfectly," Emma said. "I understand that I have more money than I'll ever need, while my sister is being forced to prove her worthiness for basic support. I understand that you've created an unfair system that's hurting both of us." By the end of that long afternoon, we'd reached some agreements, though not without significant resistance from our parents. Emma would gradually take on more responsibility for her own expenses, using part of her trust fund to maintain her independence while learning to manage money and face real-world challenges. I would receive equal financial support through graduation, with no more ultimatums or threats. The contract they'd made me sign was torn up on the spot. More importantly, our parents agreed to family therapy, something Emma had been suggesting for years, but they'd resisted, claiming they could handle our family's issues privately. Emma also insisted on transferring $100,000 from her trust fund to a new account in my name. "It's not half," she said, "but it's enough to give you the same security I've had. You can use it for graduate school, or to start your career, or just to know that you have options." The money felt surreal, like winning a lottery I'd never entered. But more than the financial security, what mattered was the acknowledgement that I deserved the same consideration my sister had always received. The weeks that followed were complicated. Our parents struggled with the changes, especially Mom, who worried constantly about Emma's mental health. Emma had moments of anxiety about taking on more responsibility, but she also seemed more confident and purposeful than I'd ever seen her. As for me, I had to learn how to accept help and support without constantly looking over my shoulder for the catch. Years of conditional love had taught me to be suspicious of generosity, and it took time to trust that this new dynamic was real. Emma and I started having weekly coffee dates, something we'd never done before. During one of these meetings, about a month after our family confrontation, she asked me something that surprised me. "Do you forgive me," she said quietly, "for benefiting from an unfair system for so long? For not speaking up sooner?" I thought about it for a long time before answering. "I forgive you for being sick and for being scared, and for not knowing how to handle an impossible situation. But I need you to promise me that we'll never have secrets like this again." "Never," she said immediately. "And Sarah, thank you for fighting for both of us. I don't think I would have had the courage to confront them on my own." The family therapy sessions were revealing in ways I hadn't expected. Our therapist, Dr. Chen, helped us understand that our parents' approach had been driven by trauma and fear rather than malice. They genuinely believed they were protecting both of their daughters, Emma from stress that could trigger her mental health issues, and me from becoming spoiled or entitled. But good intentions, Dr. Chin explained, don't excuse harmful actions. Our parents had to learn that treating children differently based on perceived strengths and weaknesses can be just as damaging as neglect. "You created a dynamic where Emma felt guilty for receiving support, and Sarah felt she had to earn love," Dr. Chin told our parents during one session. "Neither of your daughters felt truly secure in your affection." It took months of therapy for our family dynamics to really change. Dad struggled the most with letting go of his belief that making me work harder was building my character. Mom had to learn that supporting Emma's independence wasn't the same as abandoning her. But gradually, things improved. Emma started taking on part-time work, initially just a few hours a week at an art gallery, building her confidence in real-world situations. I learned to accept support without feeling like I had to earn it through perfect performance. Our parents started treating us more equally, not identically, because we were different people with different needs, but with the same level of respect and consideration. The trust fund revelation had opened a door to conversations we'd never had before. Emma told me more about her struggles with depression and anxiety, helping me understand how close we'd come to losing her. I told her about the years of feeling like I was never good enough, the way conditional love had shaped my self-worth. We discovered that we'd both been damaged by our parents' approach, just in different ways. Emma had been wrapped in cotton wool that prevented her from developing confidence and independence. I'd been thrown into cold water and told to swim, developing strength but also deep insecurities about my worthiness. Now, as I near graduation with a 3.7 GPA that I earned for myself rather than to meet someone else's ultimatum, I understand something I didn't before. Fairness isn't always about equal treatment. Sometimes it's about recognizing that different people need different kinds of support. But transparency, that's non-negotiable. The secrets nearly destroyed our family, and it was only when we started telling the truth that we could begin to heal. Emma is thriving in her new role as a more independent adult, using her artistic talents and her financial resources to start a nonprofit art therapy program for teens struggling with mental health issues. She's transforming her privileged position into something that helps others who face the same challenges she did. She also moved out of the luxury apartment, choosing a smaller, more affordable place that she pays for entirely herself. "I need to know that I can take care of myself," she told our parents. "The safety net is nice, but I don't want to need it." And me. I'm learning to define my own worth outside of my parents' approval, building a life based on my own values rather than their expectations. The money Emma shared with me has given me options I never had before. I can pursue graduate school without crushing debt, or take an unpaid internship in a field I'm passionate about, or simply have the security of knowing I won't be financially abandoned if I make a choice my parents don't understand. The family dynamics that shaped us for so long are changing, slowly but surely. We're not perfect, and we probably never will be. Our parents still sometimes slip into old patterns, worrying too much about Emma, expecting too much from me. But we call them out on it now, and they're learning to catch themselves. We're honest now, and that makes all the difference. Looking back, I realized that the trust fund was never really about money. It was about what the money represented: love, security, faith in the future. Emma had received all of those things freely, while I'd been told I had to earn them. The most important lesson I learned wasn't about money or fairness. It was about the courage to speak up when something isn't right, especially when, it involves the people you love most. Sometimes the truth hurts, but lies hurt more. And sometimes the people who love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest, not because they don't care, but because they care so much they can't see clearly. The real revelation wasn't about the money Emma had been given. It was about the assumptions our parents had made about who we were and what we needed. They decided that Emma was fragile and needed protection, while I was strong and needed challenges. They created a self-fulfilling prophecy where Emma became dependent on their support, and I became desperate for their approval. But people are more complex than their worst moments or their greatest strengths. Emma wasn't just fragile, she was also creative, intelligent, and capable of growth. I wasn't just strong, I was also vulnerable, insecure, and in need of unconditional love. When our parents finally saw us as complete human beings, rather than collections of traits to be managed, everything changed. The trust fund is still there, and Emma still has financial advantages I don't. But now those advantages come with acknowledgement of the inequality they represent, and with Emma's commitment to using her privilege responsibly. More importantly, we all understand now that love isn't about protection or challenges. It's about seeing people clearly, supporting them appropriately, and being honest about the choices we make. Because that's what real love looks like. Not protection from the truth, but the strength to face it together. Emma and I are closer now than we've ever been. We text each other almost daily, and we've developed traditions like Sunday dinners where we cook together and talk about everything. Our goals, our fears, our parents' latest attempt to slip back into old patterns. Last week, she told me something that surprised me. "You know what's funny? I always envied you." "Envied me? For what?" "For knowing that you could handle anything. I spent so much time being afraid of falling apart again, but you never had that fear. You knew you were strong enough to survive whatever came your way." It was a perspective I'd never considered. While I'd been envying her security, she'd been envying my resilience. We were both looking at each other's lives and seeing only what we didn't have. I realized. Exactly. But now we can see the whole picture. The whole picture includes the fact that our family is still healing. Our parents are learning, slowly, to see their daughters as individuals rather than problems to be solved. Emma is discovering her own strength while maintaining the creativity that makes her special. And I'm learning that asking for help doesn't make me weak, it makes me human. The trust fund revelation changed everything, but not in the way I initially thought it would. It wasn't about the money itself. It was about what the money revealed about our family's hidden dynamics, unspoken assumptions, and the different ways love can be expressed. Now we know better. We do better. And that's the foundation we're building our new family relationships on. Not the shaky ground of secrets and assumptions, but the solid foundation of truth, equality, and unconditional love. If you liked this story, leave your opinion in the comments and, of course, leave a like and subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Big hug and see you soon.